My name is Morgan Walker, and at 32, I thought I knew everything about my family. My grandmother Elaine has always been my rock, especially when my graphic design business hit rough waters this year. Our monthly family dinners at my parents' house were a tradition I cherished, despite the underlying tension that seemed to follow us like a shadow. None of us could have predicted how one innocent question would rip open decades of secrets. Before I tell you how my entire family fell apart over dinner, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to hear more stories about family secrets that can never stay buried. Growing up, I always knew Grandma Elaine was wealthy. Not just comfortable, but genuinely rich from the real estate empire my grandfather had built before his death 15 years ago. While my parents, Catherine and Thomas, lived a solidly middle-class life, Grandma's home was a sprawling estate in the wealthiest part of town, with manicured gardens and a staff that had been with her for decades. From my earliest memories, there was something off about how my parents interacted with Grandma. Mom would plaster on a smile that never reached her eyes, while Dad would become unusually quiet, almost submissive in her presence. As a child, I thought this was just how adults behaved. But as I grew older, I noticed the undercurrent of resentment, particularly from my mother. "Your grandmother thinks her money makes her better than everyone," Mom would mutter after family gatherings. "She lorded it over your father and me our entire marriage." Despite my mother's attitude, Grandma Elaine and I had always been close. She taught me to paint when I was 7, bought me my first professional camera when I showed interest in photography at 13, and fully supported my decision to study graphic design instead of business as my parents had pushed for. "Follow your passion, Morgan," she told me during my senior year of high school. While my parents argued I needed a practical degree, life is too short to live it for someone else's approval. My siblings had different relationships with Grandma. Ryan, my older brother, kept his distance. He worked in finance, just as our father had always wanted, and seemed determined to make his own way without Grandma's influence. Caitlin, my younger sister, was polite but distant with Grandma, following Mom's example of stiff formality. After college, I built a modest but growing graphic design business. I had secured several regular clients and was making enough to rent a small apartment in the city and pay down my student loans. Then the pandemic hit, and my biggest client, a hospitality group that accounted for almost 60% of my income, canceled all contracts indefinitely. Suddenly, I was struggling to make rent. I never told my family about my financial troubles. Mom and Dad had always been critical of my career choice, and I couldn't bear their "I told you so" lectures. Ryan was deep in his own financial stresses after a divorce that had drained his savings. Caitlin was still finishing her master's degree and had no money to spare. The only person I confided in was Grandma Elaine. I visited her one afternoon, hoping for advice more than anything else. Instead, she insisted on helping. "Let me support you until you get back on your feet," she said firmly. "That's what family is for." I reluctantly accepted what I thought was a one-time gift to cover rent and groceries. Little did I know what was actually happening behind the scenes. In the months that followed, I noticed my parents behaving strangely whenever Grandma called or was mentioned. Mom would suddenly find reasons to leave the room, and Dad would become intensely interested in whatever was on television. At the time, I chalked it up to their usual awkwardness around the topic of Grandma's wealth. The day of the fateful dinner arrived on a crisp autumn evening. I parked my 10-year-old Honda behind my father's shiny new SUV, which I'd been surprised to see him driving 3 months earlier. Just taking advantage of those 0% financing deals, he'd explained vaguely when I asked about the upgrade from his sensible sedan. The house I grew up in looked different too. New landscaping adorned the front yard, and as I walked in, I noticed the living room had been redecorated with expensive-looking furniture. "Do you like it?" Mom asked, gesturing around proudly. We decided it was time to treat ourselves a little. "It looks great," I said, wondering how a high school administrator and a mid-level insurance manager were suddenly splurging on luxury items. Business must be good. We're getting by, Dad said, a little too quickly. Can I get you a drink? As I sipped the expensive wine Dad poured, I wandered around, noticing more upgrades. A new kitchen with marble countertops, high-end appliances that gleamed under recessed lighting, designer fixtures throughout. My parents had always been financially cautious, clipping coupons and buying store brands. This sudden display of wealth didn't add up. Ryan arrived next, immediately heading for the liquor cabinet and pouring himself a generous scotch. He'd been drinking more since his divorce, but tonight he seemed particularly intent on numbing himself. Big day at work? I asked, trying to make conversation. Something like that, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. Is Grandma here yet? Caitlin was the last to arrive before Grandma, rushing in with her eyes glued to her phone. She barely looked up to greet anyone. Thumbs flying over the screen with urgent energy. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, just school stuff, she said dismissively, though her master's program was on break. She too seemed on edge, as if bracing for something unpleasant. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating with unspoken tension. Mom kept disappearing into the kitchen to check on dinner, though the timer hadn't gone off. Dad repeatedly straightened the already perfect place settings. Ryan poured his second drink. Caitlin couldn't stop checking her phone. Something was definitely wrong with my family, and I was about to find out exactly what. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Grandma Elaine was nothing if not punctual. Dad hurried to answer while Mom frantically gave last-minute instructions. Everyone smile. Best behavior. Not a word about the kitchen remodel. Grandma entered like royalty, elegant in a tailored navy dress with her signature pearl necklace. At 78, she stood straight as an arrow, her silver hair perfectly styled, radiating the confidence of a woman who had navigated decades of business deals and social hierarchies. Catherine, she nodded at my mother with cool politeness. Thomas, slightly warmer to my father. Then her face lit up when she saw me. Morgan, darling. She embraced me warmly, her familiar scent of Chanel No. 5 enveloping me like a childhood memory. I noticed the subtle stiffening of my mother's shoulders at this display of affection. Ryan, you're looking thin. Are you eating properly? Grandma asked, patting his cheek. Ryan forced a smile. Already on his third scotch. Working hard, Grandma, he said, the ice in his glass clinking nervously. Caitlin, put that phone away when you're greeting your grandmother, Mom hissed. And Caitlin reluctantly slipped the device into her pocket, offering Grandma a practice smile. Sorry, Grandma. School project deadline. During your break? Grandma raised a perfectly arched eyebrow, and I realized she knew Caitlin was lying. Nothing got past Elaine Walker. Mom ushered us all to the dining room, where she had outdone herself with the spread. Prime rib, roasted to perfection. Truffle mashed potatoes. Asparagus with hollandaise. Freshly baked rolls. Crystal glasses sparkled under the new chandelier, and the good china, typically reserved for major holidays, adorned the table. You've gone to quite some trouble, Catherine, Grandma observed, her gaze lingering on the expensive wine bottles and elaborate centerpiece. Special occasion. Just wanted to make it nice, Mom replied, her smile tight. Family is everything, after all. We took our seats, Dad at one end, Grandma at the other, a physical representation of the power dynamic that had defined our family for decades. Mom served the food with shaking hands, dropping a roll and apologizing profusely. The house looks different, Catherine, Grandma remarked casually as she delicately cut her meat. New furniture. Just a few pieces. Mom answered quickly. Nothing special. And Thomas, that's a new car in the driveway, isn't it? Dad nearly choked on his wine. Great deal. End of year clearance. Grandma nodded slowly, her eyes revealing nothing. Ryan, how is the investment banking going? Made partner yet? Ryan stared into his fourth drink. On track, Grandma. Just need to land a few more big clients. And you, Caitlin? The master's program in economics is going well. Caitlin nodded too enthusiastically. Absolutely. Top of my class. I watched this strange exchange with growing unease. Everyone was performing, but for whose benefit? And why were my parents so nervous about their recent purchases? The conversation moved to safer topics, neighborhood news, an upcoming charity gala, the weather forecast. But the undercurrent of tension remained, intensifying with each passing minute. Mom kept glancing at Dad, who seemed to be sweating despite the comfortable temperature in the room. Morgan, Grandma turned to me suddenly. How is your business recovering? Finding new clients to replace the hospitality group. Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. Morgan's doing just fine, Elaine. She doesn't need to discuss work at dinner. Grandma's eyes narrowed slightly. I was asking Morgan, Catherine. It's been challenging, I admitted, but I'm starting to build the client list back up. Hoping to be back to full capacity by next quarter. That's my girl. Grandma smiled approvingly. Persistence is a Walker family trait, at least for some of us. Mom's knuckles turned white around her fork at the implied criticism. Dad suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. As dinner progressed, Grandma continued asking pointed questions about finances. How much had the kitchen remodel cost? Was Ryan's firm really as stable as reported in the business journals? How much was Caitlin's tuition for her master's program? Each question seemed to increase my parents' discomfort. Mom tried changing the subject repeatedly, bringing up innocuous topics like her garden club or neighborhood gossip. Dad barely spoke, letting Mom do the conversational heavy lifting while he nodded along. Ryan drank steadily, his words becoming slightly slurred. Caitlin kept checking her phone under the table when she thought no one was looking. I sat in confused silence, sensing that I was missing something significant. By the time Mom brought out dessert, an elaborate tiramisu that was definitely not her usual recipe, the tension in the room was unbearable. Something was about to break, and somehow, instinctively, I knew it would change our family forever. As Mom served the tiramisu with trembling hands, Grandma dabbed her lips with her napkin and turned her full attention to me. The conversation had momentarily lulled, and in that dangerous silence, Grandma spoke the words that would detonate our family's carefully constructed facade. Morgan, darling. I've been meaning to ask you, she said, her voice casual but her eyes sharp. Is the $2,000 I send you every month enough? If you need more while you're rebuilding your business, you only need to ask. The tiramisu spoon froze halfway to my mouth. I blinked, certain I had misheard. What money? The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush new carpet. Everyone at the table turned to stare at my parents, whose faces drained of color so rapidly it was as if someone had pulled a plug. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Dad suddenly found the pattern on his dessert plate fascinating. What money, Grandma? I repeated, my voice stronger now, looking between her and my ashen-faced parents. Grandma's eyes never left my mother's face, her expression hardening into granite. Catherine, perhaps you'd like to explain why Morgan doesn't know about the monthly allowance I've been providing for her since she told me about her financial difficulties? Mom let out a high-pitched laugh that sounded more like a cry of pain. Oh, Mother, there's been a misunderstanding. Is there? Grandma cut her off coldly. Because my bank statements show that for the past 5 years, I've been transferring $2,000 monthly to an account you told me was Morgan's emergency fund. You specifically said she needed help with medical bills after being diagnosed with a chronic condition. My jaw dropped. Medical condition? I'm perfectly healthy. Dad finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Elaine, we can explain. I certainly hope so, Thomas, Grandma replied, her voice like ice. Because from where I'm sitting, It appears you and Catherine have been taking money intended for your daughter and spending it on yourselves. Ryan let out a low whistle and poured himself another drink. Caitlin had gone completely still, her phone forgotten. Mom? Dad? I looked at them, silently begging for a reasonable explanation. What is Grandma talking about? Mom's face crumpled, then hardened. You've always been her favorite, she spat, the years of resentment breaking through. Always getting special treatment, special attention. Why shouldn't we get some benefit from that? I felt like I'd been slapped. You've been stealing money meant for me? For 5 years. Dad at least had the decency to look ashamed. It wasn't stealing, exactly. We're your parents. We've supported you your whole life. Catherine, Grandma's voice cut through the tension like a knife. How much money have you taken that was intended for Morgan? Mom lifted her chin defiantly. We deserve it after everything we've done. Raising 3 children isn't cheap, Elaine. How much? Grandma repeated, each word carved from ice. Dad sighed heavily, defeat evident in his slumped shoulders. About $120,000 over the past 5 years. The room spun around me. $120,000. Money that could have paid off my student loans. Money that could have helped me through the business downturn without taking on credit card debt. Money that could have changed everything. And this past year? Grandma continued her interrogation. When Morgan specifically told me she was struggling financially after losing her major client, Mom's defensive mask slipped for just a moment, revealing raw panic before she composed herself. We were going to tell her eventually. Tell me what? I demanded, my voice rising. What else have you done? When you confided in me about your business troubles, Grandma explained, her eyes full of sympathy, I immediately increased the monthly amount to $5,000. Your mother assured me it was going into your account to help you stay afloat. Another $60,000. Gone. Spent on kitchen remodels and new cars and furniture while I had been eating ramen noodles and worrying about eviction. How could you? I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. Your own daughter? You don't understand the pressure we've been under, Mom said defensively. Your father's company has been downsizing. My school district froze raises years ago. We have appearances to maintain. Appearances? I echoed incredulously. You stole from me to keep up appearances? We did not steal, Mom insisted. Color returning to her face in angry blotches. We redirected family funds. Everything stays in the family. Except it wasn't yours to redirect, Grandma stated firmly. That money was explicitly for Morgan. The weight of their betrayal crushed down on me. My own parents had watched me struggle, stress, and nearly lose my apartment, all while sitting on money that was meant to help me. Money they were using for luxury purchases and lifestyle upgrades. Did you ever intend to tell me? I asked, my voice barely audible. The silence that followed was answer enough. I can't believe this is happening, I said, pushing my dessert away, my appetite completely gone. 5 years? You've been lying and stealing for 5 years. Mom's defensive posture intensified. It's not stealing when it's family. We raised you, put a roof over your head, paid for your education. Actually, I paid for her education, Grandma interjected. The trust fund I established covered tuition for all 3 grandchildren. I turned to Grandma in confusion. Trust fund? What trust fund? A look of grim understanding passed over Grandma's face. You never told her about the education trust, either, did you, Catherine? Mom shifted uncomfortably. We didn't want the children getting entitled ideas about family money. What your mother means, Grandma explained to me, is that I set up trusts for each of my grandchildren to cover higher education costs. Your parents were the trustees until you turned 25, at which point control should have transferred to you. My head was spinning. So my student loans should not exist, Grandma finished, her voice tight with anger. The money was there to pay your tuition in full. I turned to my parents, speechless with shock. I had been working 2 jobs through college to minimize my loans. eating ramen and living with 4 roommates to save money, all while a trust fund sat untouched. Where did that money go? I finally managed to ask. Dad couldn't meet my eyes. We had investments that didn't pan out. You gambled away my education fund. The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. It wasn't gambling, Mom snapped. It was a legitimate business opportunity. Which failed, Grandma stated flatly. And rather than admit your mistake and ask for help, you let your daughter take on debt that she shouldn't have had. Ryan suddenly laughed, the sound bitter and slightly slurred. Classic Mom and Dad. Let me guess, you did the same with my trust? The guilty look that flashed between our parents told us everything. You've got to be kidding me. Ryan set his glass down hard enough that liquor sloshed over the rim. I've been killing myself at that soul-sucking job to pay off my student loans, and you had access to money specifically for my education. Ryan, you don't understand, Dad began. Oh, I understand perfectly, Ryan cut him off. I understand why you pushed me so hard into finance now. You needed someone in the family who could actually make money since you two are so bad with it. Caitlin had gone completely pale. What about my trust? She asked quietly. Is that why you keep telling me my graduate program is too expensive and I should drop out? Mom and Dad exchanged another look. Oh my God, Caitlin whispered. It's gone too, isn't it? We were going to replace it, Dad said weakly. We had a plan. A plan? I echoed incredulously. Was your plan to keep stealing from Grandma indefinitely? We did not steal. Mom slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. Everything we did was for this family. To maintain our standard of living. To give you children opportunities. Opportunities. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You stole my education fund, then watched me struggle with student loans for years. You took monthly payments meant for me and spent them on granite countertops while I worried about making rent. What opportunities were you providing exactly? The facade finally cracked. Mom's composure shattered, and tears streamed down her face. Not tears of remorse, I realized with growing horror, but tears of frustration at being caught. You have no idea what it's like, she sobbed, living in Elaine's shadow all these years. Nothing we do is ever enough. We're never good enough. Never rich enough. Never successful enough. So you stole from your children to keep up appearances. Grandma's voice was cold with disgust. I expected better from you, Catherine. And you, Thomas. You stood by and allowed this to happen. Dad seemed to shrink in his chair. We were going to fix things before the kids found out. How exactly were you planning to replace over $100,000? Ryan asked skeptically. We had investments, Mom insisted through her tears. They just needed time to mature. The same brilliant investments that lost our education funds in the first place. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. You don't understand what it's like. Mom's voice rose hysterically. Always being compared to Elaine's perfect family. Always coming up short. We deserved some comfort, some security. At your children's expense? Grandma asked quietly. Is that the legacy you wanted to leave, Catherine? Stealing from one generation to fund your own comforts. It's easy for you to judge, Mom shot back. You've never had to worry about money a day in your life. Grandma's laugh was short and harsh. You know nothing about my life, Catherine. I worked alongside your father-in-law for 40 years building that real estate company. I kept the books, managed the properties, negotiated the deals while raising your husband. Nothing was handed to me. The room fell silent as decades of family mythology crumbled. Mom had always portrayed Grandma as a privileged socialite who had married into wealth. The reality, that she had been a working partner in building the family fortune, rewrote the narrative I'd grown up with. I think, Grandma said, carefully folding her napkin and placing it beside her untouched dessert, that this dinner is over. And so is my financial support of you, Catherine and Thomas. Mom's tear-streaked face turned desperate. Elaine, please, you can't. I can and I will. Grandma cut her off. You've betrayed not only me but your own children. From this moment forward, any financial assistance I provide will go directly to my grandchildren. No exceptions, no intermediaries. We'll lose everything, Dad whispered, the reality of their situation finally hitting him. Perhaps you should have considered that before spending money that wasn't yours, Grandma replied without sympathy. She turned to me, her expression softening. Morgan, I'm so sorry. I should have verified where the money was going. This is partly my failure as well. I couldn't speak. The magnitude of the betrayal was too overwhelming. These people, my parents, had watched me struggle financially for years while actively stealing money meant to help me. They had let me believe I was alone in my financial troubles while secretly benefiting from funds intended for my security. Without a word, I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked out the front door. Behind me, I could hear Mom calling my name, but I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see their faces or hear another word of their pathetic justifications. As I started my car, I caught a glimpse of my family through the dining room window, Mom crying dramatically, Dad with his head in his hands, Ryan pouring another drink, Caitlin texting furiously, and Grandma watching it all with regal disappointment. In that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. For 3 days, I didn't answer my phone. The calls and texts piled up, mostly from my parents, whose messages evolved from defensive, "You don't understand the whole situation," to desperate, "Please. We need to talk," to manipulative, "After everything we've done for you, you owe us a conversation." I couldn't bring myself to respond to any of them. On the 4th day, Grandma called. Unlike my parents, she left only one voicemail. "Morgan, when you're ready to talk, I'm here. No pressure, no timeline. I love you." That simple message, free of demands or guilt, brought me to tears. I called her back that evening. "Can I come over?" I asked, my voice small and uncertain. "Of course, darling. I'll have Marta make your favorite lemon cookies." Grandma's house was a sanctuary, untouched by the chaos that had engulfed our family. The familiar scent of lemon and vanilla greeted me as Marta, Grandma's housekeeper of 30 years, ushered me into the sunroom where Grandma waited with tea already poured. "I've been doing some investigating," Grandma said after our initial greetings. Never one to waste time on small talk when important matters needed addressing. And I'm afraid what we discovered at dinner was just the tip of the iceberg. She slid a folder across the table to me. Inside were bank statements, trust documents, and transfer records spanning back nearly a decade. "Your parents' financial deceptions go much deeper than we realized," she explained gently. "They've been systematically misappropriating funds intended for all 3 of you children since you were in high school." The documents told a damning story. Not only had my parents emptied our education trusts and pocketed my monthly allowance, but they had also attempted similar schemes with Ryan and Caitlin. They told me Ryan needed money for a down payment on his first house, Grandma explained. I sent $50,000 that apparently never reached him. They claimed Caitlin needed help with medical bills after a car accident 3 years ago, an accident that, as far as I can tell, never happened. My hands shook as I flipped through the papers. Did Ryan and Caitlin know about any of this? I've spoken with both of them. Ryan suspected something was amiss when your parents bought their vacation timeshare the same month he was denied a loan for his house. Caitlin knew nothing. She's been completely in the dark. I felt sick. How much have they taken altogether? Grandma's face was grim. Close to $400,000 over the past decade. The number was staggering. My parents, who had always preached financial responsibility and hard work, had been secretly siphoning off family money to fund their lifestyle. There's something else you should know. Grandma continued carefully. Your student loans were paid off 3 years ago. I stared at her in confusion. That's impossible. I make payments every month. To an account your parents set up, Grandma confirmed, pointing to a document. The actual loans were paid in full from your trust fund, one of the few legitimate uses they made of that money. The payments you've been making have been going directly to your parents. The room seemed to tilt around me. For 3 years, I had been sending $500 monthly to an account I believed was my student loan servicer. That was $18,000 of my hard-earned money straight into my parents' pockets. Why? I whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. Why would they do this to their own children? Grandma sighed heavily. I believe your mother has been trying to maintain a lifestyle beyond their means for many years. Your father goes along with it rather than confront her. They've been living on credit cards, home equity loans, and whatever they could extract from the family. The house you grew up in was purchased with money I provided as a down payment, money they told me they had saved themselves. The perfect middle-class life I thought we had lived was a carefully constructed illusion, built on lies and theft. The next day, Ryan called me. His voice was uncharacteristically subdued. Did Grandma tell you everything? I think so, I replied. It's hard to believe it's real. I confronted Dad yesterday, Ryan said. He broke down completely. They're in much worse shape than even Grandma knows. Second mortgage on the house, maxed out credit cards, personal loans they can't repay. They've been robbing Peter to pay Paul for years. And we're Peter, I said bitterly. Exactly. I think Mom has some kind of problem she can't stop spending. And Dad enables it because he's too weak to stand up to her. Later that evening, Caitlin came to my apartment. Her eyes were red from crying. I caught Mom in a lie 3 years ago, she confessed, curled up on my couch with a cup of tea. Remember when she said Grandma had sent a gift for my 25th birthday, but it got lost in the mail? I nodded, vaguely recalling the incident. I called Grandma to thank her anyway, and she had no idea what I was talking about. When I confronted Mom, she made me promise not to tell anyone. Said it would break up the family if I made a big deal about it. I was stupid enough to believe her. You weren't stupid, I assured her. You trusted our mother. We all did. The more we talked, the more the pieces fell into place. Small inconsistencies over the years. Expensive purchases that didn't align with their income. The constant pressure on all of us to succeed financially while they undermined our ability to do so. A week after the disastrous dinner, I finally agreed to meet my parents at their house. I needed answers, and I needed to see them face to face. They looked terrible. Mom had lost weight, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame. Dad's face was haggard, with new lines etched around his mouth. Morgan, Mom reached for me as I entered, but I stepped back. Thank you for coming. We've been so worried. Worried about me, or worried about your financial house of cards collapsing? I asked coldly. They ushered me into the living room, the room with the expensive new furniture that had been bought with money meant for me. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. We know we've made terrible mistakes, Dad began, his voice trembling. We never meant for things to go this far. How far did you think they would go? Did you have an exit strategy? Or were you just planning to keep stealing indefinitely? Mom flinched at the word stealing, but didn't argue this time. We got caught up in it, she admitted. One small deception led to another, and before we knew it, we were in too deep to find a way out. So you just kept digging the hole deeper, I said. And dragging your children down with you. Dad nodded miserably. The market crash hit my retirement fund hard. Then Catherine wanted to renovate the kitchen. Then we needed a new car. It was always just one more thing, one more time. We told ourselves we'd pay it all back eventually. With what money? I demanded. Your combined income hasn't changed significantly in years. How were you planning to replace hundreds of thousands of dollars? They exchanged a look that told me there had never been a real plan. Where did all the money go? I asked, gesturing around at the house that suddenly seemed like a movie set, a facade with nothing substantial behind it. Mom burst into tears. We're about to lose it all anyway. The bank called yesterday. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The credit cards are all maxed out. Your father's been denied for another loan. You've been living completely beyond your means, I realized aloud. For years. Dad nodded, defeated. We kept thinking things would turn around. A promotion, an inheritance, something. So you gambled with your children's financial security while waiting for a windfall that never came, I summarized, disgust rising in my throat. And now that Grandma has cut you off, the whole house of cards is collapsing. We're going to lose the house, Mom whispered, fresh tears tracking down her hollow cheeks. Everything we've worked for, gone. I should have felt sympathy. These were my parents, after all. The people who had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, nursed me through childhood illnesses. But in this moment, all I could see were two selfish, manipulative people who had betrayed not just me, but my siblings and my grandmother as well. You didn't work for any of this, I said, standing up. You stole it. From your children. From Grandma. From everyone who trusted you. Morgan, please. Dad reached for my hand. We're still your parents. We still love you. I pulled away. Love doesn't steal from people. Love doesn't watch someone struggle when you have the means to help them. Love doesn't lie for years on end. As I walked toward the door, Mom called after me. So that's it? You're just going to abandon us when we need you most. I turned back, incredulous. You stole from me for years. You watched me stress about money, work multiple jobs, eat ramen for dinner, all while sitting on funds that were meant for me. And now you have the audacity to accuse me of abandoning you. The silence that followed was deafening. I'll be in touch when I'm ready, I said finally. But don't call me, don't text me, and don't show up at my apartment. I need time to process all of this. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Mom collapse into sobs. Dad's murmured comfort followed me down the driveway. For the first time in my life, I felt completely detached from the people who had raised me. I was on my own now, but perhaps I always had been. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions, grief, anger, disbelief, and eventually, a strange sense of clarity. I threw myself into my work, taking on new clients and rebuilding my business with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Without the constant weight of financial stress, I found new creative energy for my designs. Grandma had been true to her word. The day after our tea, she had established a new monthly deposit directly to my account, this time with me as the sole account holder. She had also transferred a lump sum that she calculated was roughly equivalent to what my parents had taken from me over the years. This isn't charity, she insisted when I tried to refuse. This is your birthright, money that should have been yours all along. Take it, invest it, use it to build the life you deserve. With those funds, I was able to move to a better apartment, upgrade my ancient computer and design software, and even hire a part-time assistant to help with administrative tasks. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. Ryan and I grew closer during this time, bonding over our shared experience of betrayal. He had finally quit the finance job he hated and was using his portion of Grandma's restitution to start his own business consulting firm. I never wanted to be in finance, he admitted during one of our weekly dinners. I only did it because Dad pushed so hard, and I thought it would make them proud. What a waste of 10 years. Caitlin was struggling more than either of us. As the youngest, she had been the most sheltered from our parents' financial realities. The revelations hit her hardest, especially when she learned that her graduate program, which our parents had been pressuring her to quit, was fully funded by Grandma's original trust. I almost dropped out last semester because Mom kept saying it was too expensive, she told me tearfully. I was ready to give up my dream because they lied about money that was literally designated for my education. With Grandma's support, Caitlin continued her program with renewed focus. The three of us grandchildren formed our own support system, meeting regularly without our parents' knowledge. As for Mom and Dad, their financial house of cards had indeed collapsed. 2 months after the fateful dinner, they were forced to put their house on the market. The bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings, and selling was their only option to avoid complete financial ruin. The new cars were repossessed. The timeshare was surrendered. The credit card companies were calling daily. I didn't witness any of this firsthand. My information came through Ryan, who maintained minimal contact with them. I still wasn't ready to face them, my anger too raw, the betrayal too fresh. 3 months after the dinner, I received a letter from Mom. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter on expensive stationery, probably purchased during their years of excess. Morgan, it began, we know we've hurt you deeply, and no apology can undo the damage we've caused. But we hope you can find it in your heart to give us a chance to explain ourselves fully. The letter went on for several pages, detailing their financial struggles, the pressure they felt to maintain appearances, the slippery slope of their first deception that led to years of lies. It was part explanation, part justification, and only the barest hint of genuine remorse. What struck me most was what the letter didn't contain, a clear acknowledgement of the harm they had caused. Not just financially, but emotionally. There was no recognition of how they had undermined my independence, my self-confidence, my ability to build a secure future. It was still, at its core, about them, their struggles, their justifications, their pain. I didn't respond. A week later, I met with Grandma for our now regular Sunday brunch. She looked concerned as she studied my face. "You received Catherine's letter," she stated rather than asked. I nodded. It was disappointing. "They're still not taking full responsibility," Grandma observed, stirring her tea thoughtfully. "Catherine has always struggled with that. So has Thomas, in his own quiet way." "Did you know?" I asked suddenly. "All these years. Did you suspect something was wrong?" Grandma sighed heavily. I had concerns. Things didn't always add up. But I never wanted to believe they would steal from their own children. Perhaps that was my greatest failing, giving them the benefit of the doubt when the evidence suggested otherwise. "It's not your fault," I assured her. "They fooled all of us." Nevertheless, I should have been more vigilant. "I'm sorry, Morgan." Her sincere apology, something my parents had yet to offer, brought tears to my eyes. "What happens now?" I asked. "With Mom and Dad?" "They found an apartment," Grandma informed me. "Much smaller than they're used to. Thomas is still working, though I understand he's been demoted due to performance issues. Catherine has taken a part-time job at a department store, her first paid employment in 20 years. The image of my status-conscious mother working retail was difficult to reconcile with the woman who had raised me. Yet there was something appropriate about it, a necessary humbling. "Are you helping them?" I asked, not accusingly, just curious. "Minimally," Grandma admitted. "I've paid 3 months' rent on their apartment to prevent them from becoming homeless. But beyond that basic humanitarian support, no. They need to face the consequences of their actions and rebuild on their own terms." I nodded, relieved that Grandma wasn't enabling their behavior, but still showing basic compassion. "And what about you, Morgan? Are you ready to speak with them?" I considered the question carefully. "Not yet. Maybe soon, but not yet. I'm still processing everything. Take all the time you need." Grandma patted my hand. "Healing can't be rushed." For months after the dinner revelation, I finally agreed to meet my parents at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. They were already waiting when I arrived, both looking years older than when I'd last seen them. Mom had lost the polished appearance she had always maintained. Her roots were showing, her clothes were off the rack rather than designer, and she wore minimal makeup. Dad's confident posture was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of a defeated man. "Thank you for coming," Dad said as I sat down across from them. "We weren't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But I have some things I need to say to you." They nodded, exchanging nervous glances. "What you did wasn't just financially damaging," I began, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "You undermined my independence. You watched me struggle when you could have helped. You stole years of financial security from me. Years I can never get back." Mom started to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. The worst part isn't even the money. It's the betrayal of trust. You're supposed to be the people I can count on most in this world, and you used me. You lied to my face repeatedly for years. You manipulated me, gaslit me, and then had the audacity to blame me for being Grandma's favorite when you were caught. Tears streamed down Mom's face, but I continued. I don't recognize you anymore. I don't know who you are. The parents I thought I had would never have done these things. We made terrible mistakes, Dad acknowledged, his voice breaking. We lost ourselves somewhere along the way, became people we never meant to be. We want to make amends, Mom added desperately. We know we can't repay the money, not anytime soon. But we want to rebuild our relationship with you. I studied them, searching for genuine remorse. There was pain there, certainly. But how much was for their actions and how much for their consequences? I need time, I said finally. And actions, not words. Show me you've changed through consistent behavior over time. That's the only way forward I can see right now. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that. But it was a door left slightly ajar. A possibility for the future if they were willing to do the hard work of genuine change. As I left the coffee shop, I felt lighter somehow. I had spoken my truth, set my boundaries, and taken control of the narrative. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Proud of you for meeting them. How are you feeling? I thought about it for a moment before responding, like I'm finally starting my real life. And in many ways, I was. 6 months after the dinner that changed everything, I stood in my new studio space, surveying the clean lines, abundant natural light, and state-of-the-art equipment with a sense of quiet pride. With Grandma's financial support and my own hard work, Morgan Walker Design had not just recovered, but was thriving. I had hired 2 full-time employees, moved to a professional space, and landed several major clients. Life had taken on a rhythm that felt both new and authentic. Sunday brunches with Grandma were sacred time. Weekly dinners with Ryan and Caitlin strengthened our sibling bond. My calendar was filled with client meetings, creative workshops, and even the occasional date, aspects of life I had neglected during years of financial struggle. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. We had established limited contact, occasional texts, brief phone calls on birthdays and holidays, one carefully navigated dinner at a restaurant. They were trying in their way. Mom had joined a financial management support group. Dad was seeing a therapist. They lived modestly now in their small apartment, working jobs that barely covered their expenses. It's strange. I told Grandma during one of our brunches. Part of me still loves them because they're my parents. But I don't trust them, and I'm not sure I ever will again. Trust, once broken, is the most difficult thing to rebuild, Grandma observed. It requires consistent truth-telling over time. They're at the beginning of that journey. Do you think they can change? I asked. Really change? Grandma considered the question carefully. People can change when the pain of remaining the same becomes too great. Your parents have certainly experienced that pain. Whether it's enough to transform them fundamentally, that remains to be seen. In the months since the revelation, Grandma had implemented a new system for financial gifts to her grandchildren. Everything was transparent, documented, and directly managed. No intermediaries, no opportunities for misappropriation. I should have done this years ago, she admitted. But I trusted Catherine and Thomas to honor their responsibilities as parents. That was my mistake. With the financial support I should have had all along, I was able to focus on growing my business rather than merely surviving. The chronic stress that had been my constant companion for years gradually receded, replaced by a newfound confidence in my future. Ryan had undergone a similar transformation. Free from the golden handcuffs of his finance career, he had discovered a genuine passion for helping small businesses develop sustainable models. His consulting firm was small but growing steadily, and for the first time since childhood, I saw real joy in my brother's eyes. I never knew work could be this satisfying, he told me over drinks one evening. I actually look forward to Mondays now. How weird is that? Caitlin had perhaps changed the most of all of us. The shy, people-pleasing youngest child had found her voice. She stood up to our parents when they tried to guilt her about not visiting more often. She excelled in her graduate program. She even started dating someone our mother would definitely not approve of, a tattoo artist with kind eyes and a gentle heart. I spent my whole life trying to make Mom and Dad proud, she confided during one of our sibling dinners. What a waste of energy that was. As for Grandma, she had emerged from the ordeal with a renewed sense of purpose. At 79, she had revamped her entire approach to family wealth, establishing transparent trusts, clear documentation, and direct lines of communication with each of her grandchildren. The silence around money in this family ends with my generation, she declared. Financial literacy is a gift I should have given you all much sooner. 1 year after the fateful dinner, we gathered at Grandma's house for a new tradition, a family meeting that included only the 4 of us, Grandma, Ryan, Caitlin, and me. Our parents were not invited. I've been thinking about legacy. Grandma began once we were settled in her sunroom. Not just financial legacy, but ethical legacy. What values do we want to carry forward in this family? Over several hours, we talked openly about money, trust, communication, and boundaries. We established guidelines for how we would handle family resources and relationships moving forward. We acknowledged the trauma we had experienced and committed to breaking the cycle of financial secrecy. I propose a toast, Grandma said as we finished dinner. To the Walker family reimagined, rebuilt, and resilient. As I raised my glass, I realized how much I had grown over the past year. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead forced me to examine my own values, set clear boundaries, and build a life based on truth rather than illusion. The money that had been restored to me was significant, but the self-respect I had gained was priceless. I had learned to stand firm in my worth, to require honesty from those around me, and to walk away from relationships that undermined my well-being, even when those relationships were with my own parents. I had also learned the true meaning of family, not the performative version my parents had cultivated, but the authentic support and love that Grandma modeled and that my siblings and I were now building among ourselves. 2 years after the dinner revelation, I sat in my thriving studio, reviewing designs for a major new client. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Thinking of you today. Hope your presentation goes well. Love, Mom. It was a small thing, remembering my important presentation, sending a simple message of support without demands or guilt. But it represented the kind of consistent, respectful communication we had established as our new normal. I texted back, thanks. I'll let you know how it goes. Not warm, not effusive, but honest. That was all I could offer now. And they had learned to accept it. Later that evening, as I celebrated the successful presentation with my team, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed since that dinner 2 years ago. The path had been painful, but the destination was worth it, a life built on truth, surrounded by people I could trust, doing work I loved. The money that had been stolen from me had been returned. But the real restoration was in my spirit. I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience that could weather even the deepest betrayal, and the courage to rebuild on my own terms. That night, I called Grandma to share the news about my successful presentation. I'm so proud of you, Morgan, she said warmly. Not just for your professional success, but for the woman you've become. I learned from the best, I told her sincerely. After we hung up, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights. The woman who had discovered her parents' betrayal 2 years ago felt like a different person, younger, more naive, defined by financial struggle and family expectations. The woman I was now stood firmly on her own foundation, financially secure, emotionally resilient, surrounded by authentic relationships. The betrayal had nearly broken me. Instead, it had remade me. And for that, strangely enough, I was grateful. Have you ever discovered a betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest betrayals can ultimately lead to growth and renewal. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes losing what you thought you had is the beginning of finding something better.